need of a voice, well, I've got one.
Voice of the People, 96.1 FM.
The Evening Rush with the 1559 vibe, spiced with politics, lifestyle, sports, music. Tune in weekdays 4 to 9 p.m. only on Voice of the People, 96.1 FM. Now you have a voice.
Pretty chill evening in the city of Abuja, I must say. I'm loving the weather, reminding me of home a lot. And I hope that you're feeling as good as I am. Good evening and welcome to VOP Roundup, 7:03 p.m. by my clock. Let's talk about the state of the nation. What role are the people of Nigeria playing in the poor, dilapidated state of the country at the moment? How is our mindset affecting our realities as a nation? If you look around you, you'd find out it's beginning to look like there's a pitch between, they're pitching the government against the people. All the government is at fault. Oh no, the people are at fault. Who exactly is to blame? Is it just one group of people? Does it seem as though the government is at fault because majority of the individuals are pointing their fingers at the government and saying, oh no, you have the responsibility? What happens to the responsibility of the people to the government and to the country? Nigerians all over the country are starting to take to the streets to protest the cost of living. Yesterday, it was Minna and Kano, where youths, women and children hit the streets in their large numbers to protest the rising cost of living in the country. There have been so many efforts put in place to contain and disperse the protesters. Of course, the police tried their best, but in Minna specifically, they failed. And they stayed put until the deputy governor of the state, Yakubu Garba, came out and addressed them, and then they went back to their homes. You could hear the people calling for a return in controlled price of fuel, and also stating that if democracy was incapable of making lives better, then the military should intervene. Let's listen to the people.
Control price. They have the power to work. It's high time for us. All Nigerians are dead. Control price. We need bread on even flight. We are not talking about it. Even food. We need it. Everybody has suffered. It's enough. If they cannot help us, there's no market. They should let the people take over. Now, we have already voted for you. And you people have already decided for you to be selling bread for us at 700 naira. You are not a Nigerian. And then somebody where we are suffering. Everybody come back and also when you also and then you pay the money for the government.
And the chants continue. We no go agree. Bamwai repeated over and over. In fact, the people so much stress at the moment, and that is just in Minna, Minna State, of course. Now in Niger State, in Minna. Meanwhile, in Kano, hundreds of women, including local bread producers that's known as gurasa, which I personally love and enjoy, they marched into the streets of Kano on Friday to protest the high cost of living. Not only did they do that, also residents yesterday marched through the streets of Kano protesting the increase in price of flour, increase in price of petrol, and just the hardship in the country.
The closure of Nigerian borders is one of the major things that plunged the country into serious hardship. Also, US dollar is not our official currency. The naira needs to be strengthened, and we want the government to continue the payment of subsidy on petrol. Since it was removed, prices of food and transportation have increased.
There is hunger, there is poverty in the land and there is no money. Things are so expensive in the market. The prices of food items keep rising.
Well, in the response to the rising cost of living in the country, the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Olawale Edu, yesterday said that the rising prices of food and commodities in the country had become increasingly worrisome for the federal government. He also said that the situation was obviously caused, by demand and supply forces generally, and he said it's a growing concern among Nigerians, but this is being triggered by economics, basic economics. We're going to look at the details of this, but first let's listen to what he has to say.
I think the issue of rising prices is of concern to the government and everybody in Nigeria, and then some of the major steps which I can point out that are being taken to address this issue, because it's an issue of demand and supply, and a lot of emphasis has been placed on increasing agricultural production in particular. The president has intervened in that sector to provide grains, to provide fertilizer to farmers, to bring additional acreage, rice, maize, wheat, and cassava under additional acreage, additional production in order to increase the output and thereby bring down prices, and that will help bring down inflation. And of course, we're in the middle of the dry season farming. We're looking forward to a good dry season harvest that will help to ameliorate food prices in particular and the price level in Nigeria in general.
And there you have it. Three sides of the story. Well, lots of people say there's usually three sides to a story. Your perspective, the other person's perspective, and the truth. This time around, we have three perspectives. So let's say there's four sides to the story. The aim of this show today is to unravel what the fourth side of the story is. You can join the conversation live on YouTube. It is Voice of the People Abuja. Well, having this conversation with me first is political economist and in-house VOP analyst Olamileko Adefolarin. Hi, Folarin.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. Have you had water today? You know that's how I start. Have you had water today?
I did.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I don't worry about
Enough water?
Sure.
Okay. And then we all
want to provide more.
I mean, I could.
All right.
We could make arrangements for that. I'm all in for people drinking water this time of time. Well, we also have the founder, One Heart Initiative, public affairs analyst, Hashim Suleiman. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Let's have you had water today before I get in?
Yeah, always water.
You've had enough water.
Trust me.
All right. It's not having it in your car, drink it. And you joining us from wherever you are, driving down the road, driving home, seated at home, wherever it is, have you had water today? Number one. Number two, how vigilant have you been? Have you paid attention to the cars that drive past you? Have you paid attention to the people in your community? Remember, your security is your responsibility first before the government. Now, we've looked at the overview of, the situation. Nobody is alien to what is going on in Nigeria at the moment. It's very sad. Just to say the least. We're starting to see people protest. And I feel the irony of the entire thing is one of the people that warned us about this is the current vice president when he was still governor of Maiduguri, of Borno State rather. And he said, there was a situation with his friend's wife and the driver where people in Kano stopped them and said, he said in Hausa, that's bastards, you're enjoying while we are suffering. And, the people, after accosting them, didn't run away. It was the friend, his wife's friend, and the driver who had to cower away and all of that. And at the time, which was 2018, he was asking a very pertinent question, have Nigerians gotten to the breaking point? And of course, I think it's obvious if you ask any Nigerian on the streets if they prefer 2018 to now. From what we've heard in the protest, we know that people prefer what happened in 2018. My first question is to you, Mr. Hashim Suleiman. What are your thoughts generally regarding, where we are in the country?
Okay, thank you. So, for me, like, I really feel that it was right about time that we started to quit pretending about the issues and really begin to speak truth to ourselves and try to put some of these issues in proper perspective, so perhaps people will be able to have a clear understanding of it. First of all, is we have to emphasize the fact that we're running a democracy, and I could say, like, when you talk about the democratic literacy of the citizenry in Nigeria, you could say it's perhaps a little less, and that leads to a lot of misconceptions about issues. That leads to a lot of misunderstandings about how some of these things are supposed to be. So, how did we get here is first of all the question that we're supposed to ask, because trust me, it's not possible that prices will just begin to soar all of a sudden. There has to be, for every action, there has to be consequences. Over time, in Nigeria, we have had to make a lot of trials about policies, about a whole lot of the obvious sleazes that have been in the system, and that have been mostly in the critical sectors of Nigeria, especially the public sector, and particularly the regulatory agencies, of how weak they've become. And so all of that culminated into all of the issues we're having today. So, for example, yesterday the central bank governor spoke, and then really I listened to him. I could have a clear understanding of the situation. It was that in the past, in the near past, you had a whole lot of ring of a lot of sleazes, of a lot of misdemeanor going on about the whole currency dealings and all of that. And so today we have gotten to the extent where that has hit the roof, and then it has come back and has stared all of us in the face. And so they're making all of the attempts at trying to see how to. So that's, for example, on the part of CBN. Then you're not talking about the part of other people who are probably in the port, because we're import, dependent, and so of course the effect of CBN will then affect how some of these things end up coming into the country, because people will require forex to bring them in, and then probably the hurdles they have to face to get to bring them in. When you talk about farming, for example, once the borders were closed, a whole lot of the farmers do at least farm, and when people always talk about this issue of insecurity, not really letting people farm, yeah, perhaps the insecurity might have affected a certain percentage, but trust me, a whole lot of the states, they still farm, because this food is always being produced. You see them traveling on the road and all of that. But you see, what's happening is that people now, again, in the usual character of Nigeria, choose to begin to also create another cabal in that sector, whereby all harvests are bought off after harvest, and then people hoard them to wait for when the prices get higher, and then they bring them out. But, like, having said all of this, these are, for example, a whole lot of factors that have come to the breaking point, and they're breaking up now, and then we're seeing all of the effects. But talking about that now, we'll now then come back to all of these reactions we're seeing about the citizenry and all of that. And look, the highest the federal government can do is to intervene in states, right? Is to make sure, first of all, that their FAQ is shared every month to the 3 tiers of government. And then if there are maybe some critical areas, they could make certain interventions, and that's why you see that the federal government, apart from having regulatory agencies and ministries, they also have intervention ministries and agencies and what have you. And their role is, but now when you now check how much intervention they can be able to give out to the various states, it's more like a drop in the ocean, kind of, maybe a little more than a drop, but then it's nothing compared to what the states themselves can do in terms of helping their citizenry. A lot of the states actually doing all of that. So let me give you an example now. The Minister of Finance is talking about dry season farming. But the fact is, when you check the level of how much investment we make in terms of the provision of irrigation channels all over the country, it's extremely limited. So when you go to states like Kano, in fact, Kano is probably the highest states where irrigation farming occurs, and you'll see that all of the infrastructure for that irrigation farming are things that were done by past governors, especially Audu Bako of blessed memory. He did a whole lot in terms of investing in dams and providing all of these irrigation channels and what have you. So how much are, for example, all of the state governments that we have now over time, you can even say from 1999, have, for example, looked in that area? If from 1999 all of the governors have looked in that area, for example, especially the northern governors, by today, you would have had irrigation channels littered everywhere. And so that means that irrigation farming can happen in a minute. But right now, the irrigation farming has its tendencies. Then you also have the other side where a whole lot of those protesters are more about those people who have been used to this whole mindset and psyche of having handouts. Right? Nobody's saying it's so easy in Nigeria. And I like to always use myself as an example to emphasize on this. I mean, in my entire living in this country, once I graduated from the university, I have never had to have anybody call anybody to say, give this guy a job, right? I went through thick and thin, I went through it all, went all over the country looking for skills. And at the end of the day, yeah, it was not easy, it was a little tough, but at the end of the day, I was able to obtain the skills, and when I had the skills, they're always stuff that people will call me to come and like dispense in line with the skills that I've obtained. And these are the kind of examples. So how many of those young people are really ready to understand, yeah, that things are not hard, but at least you could be able to do something. I sometimes give somebody, one young man, an idea about an area where he could just plug in and get money, and he was shocked, like, really? Yeah, I told him, I said, look at the motor parks. Now the motor parks, the logistics business that take place in the motor parks is extremely high, in high volume. But you see, while the goods come to those motor parks, people are still more like forced to have to drive to those motor parks to go and get them. And sometimes when they call me from the motor parks, I really wish they had an option of delivery to my office. And I'm like, that's a big gap. Which of the Nigerian young person who is a graduate or anybody would think towards all of those angles and how they could go and fill in a lot of these areas that are probably not very formal? But trust me, you're going to pick up some funds that you're going to be able to buy some food to eat regardless of how expensive it could be. Now, let me talk about, for example, what the Vice President said about some people stopping some others to say you're enjoying one. But of course, how long will it take for anybody to understand that in this life, the fingers are not equal? I travel a whole lot around African countries and around the world, and there are a whole lot of countries I'll go and see that the most woke people, let me use that word, like the most woke people are actually out there and working in the supermarkets as sales girls, as sales boys. And they're so proud of it, they like it, they love it. You understand what I mean? How many young Nigerian who's a graduate who you ask to go and do a sales girl, sales boy, that will agree? They will not. So you can see that there are a whole lot of mindset things around it. But that's not to say that the federal government has got no responsibility. I think at this point right now is for the federal government to see how they can rally everybody, provide that leadership. Like I kept saying that, I was telling somebody earlier today, I said from 99 till now, if you look at the governors have gradually become so powerful to the extent that they could kind of intimidate the president and try to exert power. But from 1999 to 2007, Obasanjo was in full control of the governor, so he had a tendency to call you to order. So I think that sort of thing needs to turn back. The president needs to get everybody, all the strata of government together, needs to communicate to the people, and of course the people are even going to see that engagement where all of the governors will have to be told, because they are the custodians of the local government funds as well, that they would have to start to invest those monies on capital expenditures that could be able to provide jobs and work to do for the people. I think that's the only immediate, because right now everybody's looking to the federal government. The federal government does not have the resources and what it takes to get all of these people in the various states in their millions out of this poverty that you're seeing. That's, if anybody's expecting that, is a mirage. It cannot happen. So the state governments will definitely have to come in, so we can see how to.
All right, we got that. Thank you very much, by the way. Olamilekan.
I like the way Suleiman is bringing this issue to the fore, particularly by making sure that we understand the core responsibility of governance rests with the state government. A lot of us miss that point. Everybody's looking at federal government. Federal government, even the protestants are not calling on their state governor. They are calling on the federal government. Although I understand the peculiarity why they are doing that, because the main responsibility in terms of this economy, the core economy of Nigeria, rests with the federal government. But the other subnational government have a key responsibility, vital responsibility, to ensure that anywhere federal government stop, they take it off from that. But in this issue of price, particularly high cost of food that most Nigerians are complaining of, it started with what the federal government is doing. And just like Suleiman mentioned, it didn't start today. It started in 1999. Wrong policy, reversal policy, somersaulting policy, no policy that is just coming out to take care of the elite for themselves and for their family and for their associates and the rest of them. Particularly the ones that do with how manufacturing companies handle product produced here in Nigeria. Because one of the discovery, like Suleiman said, when you watch we all watch the CBN governor talking to their on why the forex, the naira is falling. It's as a result of some certain policy of the government in the past, whereby you say you are giving forex, you are giving dollar to certain individual to carry out productive sector in the economy, and majority of them were nothing but just round-tripping agencies collecting the dollar for free and putting it in what will double the money they have gotten. And when these real people that need the money to put in business, like people that are producing commodity food item and they didn't get the dollar, and the ones that got it, because of their arbitrary and inside abuse on what they need to do, they cause problem in the economy, particularly when it comes to price. And that's why I see that every company are just putting prices on their goods based on what they will give you the excuses. Either they will lie to you or put out there and say because of dollar, or they will tell you because of diesel expensive and the rest of them. But right now everybody is complaining about dollar. Nobody talking about diesel again, because the price of diesel have fallen. So they are not talking about the cost of energy again. They are now laying claim to the cost of exchange rate. And we know that majority of them collected $3 to invest in their business. We won't mention names of those companies, but we know that we have only 4 companies producing flour. The people in Kano are complaining about the high cost of bread. We have 4 companies that are producing flour. They are collecting $3 to import supplementary items to help them to produce the flour for Nigeria. The same 4 companies are the ones producing sugar. They also collect forex to import complementary items to produce those sugars. The same company is also producing other items that are being used to produce bread that we are eating. But how come every 72 hours this company is increasing the cost of its bread, the unit cost of its bag of sugar or bag of flour in the market every 72 hours? Yesterday I discovered that it has already reduced to every 24 hours. Why are they doing that? Because there is no control over what they are doing, and the excuses is there.
For putting the control,
the federal government will have to put on this control. But just like Suleiman, I said I like the way he started the discussion, because he has laid foundation for us to be able to build, particularly by pointing to make us understand we're in a democratic setting, and in democratic setting we are in a democratic capitalism, which shows that private individuals have to sprinkle out companies. At the end of the day, they determine the kind of profit they will make in a democratic setting. So those people who protested in Minna or in Kano, that are saying if the civilian government cannot do it, the military should come in, we need to educate them and say it is not possible at this point in time, because the system of election that we practice, the system of democracy that we practice, allow for some of these lapses, these gaps to come in. But here we are. It is our fault, because in Africa we all accepted democracy, but we never accepted that even in democracy there's what they call dictatorial democracy that is being practiced in Western countries. In Europe today, you cannot increase a dime or add a pen in UK to a price of sugar as a manufacturer. But here in Nigeria, we can do that. But in UK, the government know how to clamp on you and stop you from doing that. But here in Nigeria, if you want to do that, they will tell you that it's a democracy, it's a democratic capitalism we practice. We should allow the private company, the organized private sector, to do what they want to do. But right now in UK and the US, just in January, US dollar suffer over 7% depreciation in value. How many of us know about that? In the same US, their budget for 2024 is already suffering from contraction. How many of us know that? But the government know how to ensure that everything work balance for them, because the government of that day of the US, the president Joe Biden and his cabinet, they will bring that dictatorial tendency, that authoritarian tendency upon the economy, so that things that are not working well, people who are causing abuses or people who are causing problems that we are having in this country right now, they will be put into shape. But here in Nigeria, if you want to do that, they will tell you that the government is imposing human rights abuse on individual and group, and that's why I found ourselves in a place where we are today, whereby high cost of living is not just because the government doesn't know what to do, but because the government will not be able to do it if he really want to do what is expected to do in a democracy.
So we're saying invariably that the problem of Nigeria right now is not it's lack of political will to actually alleviate the problems of Nigerians. Is that
is
what you're
there? Lack of political will is there, but the environment of the democracy we have been practicing, will it allow them to do that political will? Take for instance the insecurity that he also rightly mentioned about farmers producing, not going to farm, and the rest of that. If the government want to really ensure that there is security of life and properties in Nigeria, many of us will complain about it. That is, if they bring the real solution and say today we want to ensure that everybody in Nigeria follow what is expected and there is security of life and property, all of us will.
Let's talk a little bit about, because both of you have agreed that there's a sense of hypocrisy in the Nigerian public. Let's talk a little bit about the hypocrisy. Are we saying that Nigerians have a habit of pointing fingers while we benefit off of the same corruption that is putting us in the place that we're in?
I think Suleiman will start with that.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, right, so, and that's why precedents, right, for me, like, we're very good at setting precedences that eventually we're not able to carry on with. So there's a general belief that the past administration has failed in a lot of circumstances.
Is it just a general belief or is it facts?
Yeah, so, you know, different people, you know, it's democracy. There are some people, maybe they could be in the minority perhaps, or who may argue with you, but that's what I'm saying, the general, like, it's become more like an acceptable fact over the fact that even if you listen to the CBN governor today about a whole lot of the shenanigans that were carried out at the CBN, you will understand all of that. But some people are now asking that people who are protesting today are from one certain region of the country. And at that time, even when some other people, perhaps they may be in the minority, they were complaining about the fact that certain things were not going right, those people came out to shut them up and be like, no, you don't have to talk to our brother like that and all of that. And so a precedent has been set. But trust me, it's not like then people were not also going through a whole lot. Maybe the prices were not as high as now, but then the insecurity issues were there and what have you. And then today, all of a sudden, people are coming out to protest, and then without even giving the government maybe some here to try to understand that perhaps they are, to a large extent, contributors to the creation of all of this. Because look, any government that cannot be able to take criticism, or that a criticism cannot be able to come to it, ends up messing up everywhere, because at the end of the day, it creates an us versus them kind of situation. And when there's us versus them, and those are part of the strategy that the politicians also utilize. When there's an us versus them, you're divided, and then the divide and rule thing comes in. And that's why you see people could come in and use all of those kind of tendencies to win elections. So, yeah, really, and that's why I said, for me right now, right, just like he mentioned that area of, I will not call it dictatorial, but I think the president has to exert his authority as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Federation. Like I said, there are a whole lot of units and cabals and different groups who are actually creating all of these artificial tendencies. Now, I mean, Nigeria is an extremely big market. People still come into Nigeria to come, and in December, I was in Lagos. If you know how many shows took place in Lagos and sold out, People are living their life. It's still the kind of money people go in. And trust me, they're legitimate earnings, perhaps made from digital platforms, trading in cryptos and all of that. A lot of those guys don't even know who. Trust me, I've met somebody who does not even know the name of the vice president of the country. I had to tell the person because the person is actually very less interested in political talks. He's busy engrossed in doing his show promotions, his digital stuff, and all of that.
Wouldn't you say that is, sorry to cut you, that is one of the problems we have, Nigerians not being invested in what is going, or one of the problems that has brought us to where we are, that there is a large population, there's a large part of the population, the Nigerian populace, that is not interested in political governance or in governance.
Yeah, no. So, look, everybody cannot be interested in governance, of course. Look, at the end of the day, there's what we call mentorship, right? And somebody has to be the one to make you get interested in something. Now, the different part of the country have got their, how will I say, their disposition to different kind of things, right? So, if you look at the northern Nigeria, everybody has known that. And that's part of the problem, for example, because where it has become a problem in northern Nigeria is that a lot of the young people in Nigeria, up to 80 to 90% of them, practically only look to government for solutions, and mostly even the federal government. Do you understand what I'm saying? For solutions to their problems. But I can tell you today, if you go to the Lekki, Victoria Island axis, or mostly the whole of Lagos, like a lot of my friends really in Lagos, we don't discuss politics with them because they're not interested in it. They don't like it. They're into something else and it's paying off. Make no mistake, that is paying off, and that's okay because they're probably even providing jobs for some other people. So everybody will not be interested in politics. Some few or some certain percentage can be interested in it, yeah. But then everybody must not be interested in politics. But what's most important is what's your ability to be able to carve a niche for yourself, to be able to build a skill, and to be able. So now, let me give you this scenario that's happening with the northern Nigeria, and that's why if you take the index, you see that the whole poverty rate, mortality rate, and all, it's higher in the northern Nigeria, and that's because up until this moment, the northern Nigeria has not seen the need to adjust to the conservative nature which they live life, right? So, or perhaps maybe some people may relate that to Islam or tribe, but then you go to countries like Dubai, Bahrain, Qatar, and the rest of them, they're all Islamic countries, but they have understood clearly that keeping to conservatism will not let them develop, and so they're every day opening up and letting things happen. So, for example, the whole lot of the trade that you can find in the Lekki Victoria Island axis, perhaps if you go to Kano and say you want to do it, you could look more like a taboo. Do you understand what I mean? And so that alone has shut out a large population of young people who may probably be honestly interested in that kind of trade. And so a whole lot of all those kind of things. So again, it leads to perhaps the need for people for especially the northern Nigeria to begin to understand they have to loosen up, they have to let young people, you have to give them digital skills, because digital skills right now in the world is the fastest way that you can get people to be able to be engaged, because from their phones alone, they could be able to make money, not only from Nigeria, they could be able to make money from all over the world, right? So all of these things are things that need to be put out. But the federal government, like I said again, cannot, she does not have the resources, she does not have the wherewithal to go to all the 36 states and get them to be on 100 in a minute, right? So therefore, that's why the subnationals come in. They have to begin to look towards investing in all of these kind of sectors, right? You go to Akwa Ibom State today, they're expecting about 10 Boeing 737 aircraft. They have the biggest hangar, I think, in West Africa now, where repairs of aeroplanes can be made and all of that. And I'm not sure maybe you ever hear anybody from Akwa Ibom themselves doing any protest, or they're quiet and just there on their side and just trying to mind their business and doing their thing. So imagine that a whole lot of the governors could actually look inwards and see how they could actually create all of these opportunities, plus federal government interventions. Everybody's going to be all right. So yeah, we do have to do a lot of soul searching, but we do how to ensure that all of these messages all of these ideas about how everybody has a responsibility has to be appropriately communicated, has to be appropriately coordinated. People have to understand that it is a responsibility that they have to administer, and that there has to be some sort of consequences, including political consequences. So political parties, including that of the president, for example, will have to look at an area where if you don't deserve a second tenure, for example, you should easily be eased out of that place and give room for people who can do it, right? All of those kind of tendencies, if we do, then perhaps we'll begin to see respite. Otherwise, honestly, I don't see how this is going to be solved.
Which brings us to the political angle, the role that politics is playing in all of this. Now, in the midst of all of this, the protests and whatnot, we still have some people that are trying to politicize it. Right? The ruling APC they went ahead to, when they were reacting to the public protest in both Minna and in Kano cities that happened yesterday, they released a statement, and it was signed by Felix Moka, the National Publicity Secretary of the APC, and he said that it's opposition parties are the ones instigating this protest, and it will now beg, it will make you begin to wonder, why do we keep trying to evade what is really going on? The government of the day, the APC administration, has made it a habit to constantly gaslight the people of Nigeria to stop thinking, to believing that they are not experiencing what it is that they are experiencing. Because how do you get women and children in the numbers we have seen, women and youths, leave the markets where they get their daily bread? This is in the core north. Let's be realistic. In the north, it's the money you make that day you are eating with. There's no money you are saving anywhere. It's the money that you made, the little profit that you got out of your sales. So these people abandoned their meal for the day. Insisted. They waited in Minna. They waited until the deputy governor was able to come and address them and calm them down, and then the APC would now come out with full temerity, pardon my language, to say, oh no, other political parties, we're not going to mention which, but they are just trying to paint the APC black. Where is the place for calling a spade a spade? I know we've had this conversation with you, Adefolari, several times, and you keep coming up with the fact that, politicians have to sound politically correct. This is not business as usual in Nigeria anymore. We can all attest to that. These are dire times. These are desperate times. We are seeing crime increase to the point that the issue we dealt with yesterday was policemen being accosted for armed robbery. That's how bad it has become. Policemen are engaging in crime, in kidnapping, in armed robbery, and all of this. What role should the political parties, ruling or not ruling, be playing right now? Because, if you remember last week when Nigeria was playing, one of the aspirants went to watch Nigeria in Abidjan, and everybody was talking about it. People were criticizing him. Is this a time for us to play politics, or is it a time for us to put our heads together to try to find a solution?
The issue is that you cannot rule out politics from all the happenings. Even the economic hardship we are facing, it is still part and parcel of wrong political theory, wrong political empirical data being applied in understanding the mood of the situation. And that's why the APC will come up with that statement and said, no, it is being instigated, it is being induced by other political parties. You can't rule that out, because we all know the tendencies of how this political elite are looking for power by all means. So they can use the temperature or the tension on ground to aggravate the level of what the people want and get what they want. If you remember when the election result was released, you know how many protests was going up and down. You know the kind of tension that was even rising to the point that a particular set of political party followership were even calling the military to come and take over the leadership of this country. So you cannot allow that political calculation from politicians. But the message still remains that the worst situation of the economy is affecting everybody, including them, the politicians, even though they have the stock of money piled up somewhere, but they know that it is also affecting them because they have individuals working for them, they have their housemates, they have their drivers, they have their cook, they have everybody working for them. They are also complaining, asking for more increase in their salary, so they're all feeling it. But the only situation that is making it a little bit easy for them is that they have access to state resources, which on the long run most of them don't give account to. That's why I say that they don't bother. A governor will not bother about whether he's filling his car. He will not bother about the food that he's going to eat in the morning, in the afternoon, in the night. Neither will the commissioner or a minister will bother about that same. Even the clothes they are wearing, they will never bother about, because the state has already made provision for that. But ordinary people like me and you will definitely feel it. I'll just give an example of how price of goods are changing every 72 hours. They don't care. They don't even know about it. A bag of sugar that is going for 74,000 naira now. Will a governor complain about it? The governor of Kano, that a protest was held in the state on Friday and yesterday, will he ever complain about food lacking in his house? He will even be happy that the people are protesting. And you know one thing about this politician is that as they are protesting in his state, and he will not be able to persuade the people to calm down. Rather, he's looking at them. But the one of Niger State came out and persuaded and asked them to go. What about the Kano State? What did he do? Rather, he was going to aggravate the situation and said, after all, it is the federal government that is collecting the largest share in terms of federal allocation. They should look out to the federal government. Meanwhile, him also has a lot of money coming to the state, just like Suleiman has pointed out. What are they doing with all the resources they are having? Apart from the infrastructure that have been built by many years ago by other governors and the rest of them, what are they doing with what they are having? What about the training? I remember Kano was one of the states that boosted in terms of ICT training, to the point they even established a university for ICT. How far has that project gone in the last 3-4 years when we have a new government in place? So you begin to look at the political calculation they are bringing in, but the message still need to be passed to them that they all have responsibility to ensure that poverty is reduced, unemployment is reduced, infrastructure are provided, and not only that, security is also guaranteed. Although we know we have issue with our constitution pertaining to security, because everybody still claims that the federal government have the shot over the military, the police. But what is the state governor doing with the 60 million that is collecting every month for security vote and the rest? So we need to just put the question, and we demand answer from both the federal government and the state government. But we should not allow that political calculation to blindfold us against the reality, because politics will always come in, and that is where the politician will use what he said earlier, the divide and rule, or we against them. And that is what APC want to bring up, we against them. It is not because you are poor, it is not because you are hungry, you are on the street. Somebody is pushing you to be on the street so that they can come and take power in 2027, and that is it. And so, we cannot rule that out.
But see, the problem with this issue about, for example, the kind of statements you're seeing out there, look, the world is changing every day. And unfortunately for a whole lot of our leaders and maybe people who manage all these political parties and the rest of it, is that they have failed to understand that times change. And so when times change, strategies would also have to change, right? And then what is the mode of recruitment of a whole lot of these people who... So for me, I may not have some problem with some of the things that the government is doing, but I could have a problem with, for example, what is the mode of recruitment of the spokesman of the APC? What are his CVs? What's his speciality in terms of strategic communication? Because look, I wrote an article not long ago where I said strategic communication was the most important political tool that you need to have around you right nowadays, right? And so strategic communication involves the tendency for you to be able to communicate effectively. Now, you may even want to actually go on that narrative that he's going. He may want to go on that narrative, but there's a better way that you put it out there in such a way that it doesn't look like you're trying to gaslight anybody, or you're trying to make it look like Nigerians do not know what they're doing. And that's why I told you, I said, the president himself would have to deliberately ensure that all of these areas... So let me give you an example now. The APC as a political party has the most number of governors. After the elections, when did we see any moment where they called all of these governors to a retreat and give them some sort of handouts to say, this is the direction of the party, this is where we're heading to, and we expect that you must go and abide by all of these tenets of the party and what they have to achieve? Did we see anything like that go on? How many times has the APC, for example, as a spokesman, come out to call out any of their own governors that is not doing right, to say, look, hey, the party is not comfortable with what you're doing, get your acts together, or else we'll have to consider sanctions or disciplinary actions, because you, after all, at the end of the day, you're representing our political party. Why does there have to be that the party will have to defend everything that every of her member does? That should not be the case. Do you understand? And that should also go to the opposition parties and every other person. Like, if the opposition party is having also some of their party members who are not aligning to their own ideals, they should have the guts to be able to come out and call them out. So, for example, I would have expected the APC spokesman to come out and insist and put out this narrative about the fact that the governors have a responsibility, and encourage them that they have to ensure that they do as much as they can to ameliorate the things in their state, coupled with all of the interventions that Mr. President is giving them. I'm sure that will even come out nicer. Nigerians will be like, yeah, this is a departure from the norm. As against every day insisting that when things happen, you have to come out, even during governance issues. These are governance issues. We've left politics issues to governance issues. APC is the one ruling right now. You have a responsibility to govern, and then so there has to be some monitoring. And I thought the political party should be the one that should monitor to make sure that the ideals of the party are promoted and are entrenched, other than coming out to defend everything and anything. I think that's still part of the old and archaic method. I think there has to be departure from that. I think there has to be clarity in communication. I think strategic communication is extremely important, even including in the presidential media team. I'm not sure that they're doing enough, because all of those people back in the villages, I'm not sure there are a whole lot of people who are going in there to engage them. Do you understand what I mean? Because I mean, all of these platforms we use have their own certain reach, but there are a whole lot of other people that do not have access to all of these platforms.
Talking about people, the platforms, and the core villages where they are feeling the brunt of the situations in the country now, insecurity, both food insecurity and security insecurity. Pardon me, my French. Now, we have cited, both of you have brought up the fact that we need to, there has to be a mindset shift. In the Nigerian populace. In the whole, in the entire country, from the government all the way down, from top to bottom. In the words of our former president, there has to be a mindset shift. How do we begin to instill this different how do we start to do that? Because I mean, a mindset shift is a long-term.
It is.
Now we have at the moment we have a high dependence, a very high dependence on government problem from the people. How do we start to shift their mentality to say, oh no, we all make the government, we're all part of it. What role do we play? How do we get the message to them that, oh, you need to start changing it? Who needs to wake up to rise to the occasion?
All of these machineries do exist, and that's part of, for example, the role of INEC. INEC does not only conduct elections. Part of the responsibilities of INEC is to ensure that political parties do a sort of democratic sensitization to their people, right? And then, so now, for example, when I was talking about how a political party must ensure that her ideals are promoted, how much do the national headquarters of the various parties continue to relate with their state, chapters after elections, for example? So Nigeria is cascaded from state, federal to state to local governments, and in all those local governments there are wards. All these parties have ward chairmen in all those local governments. So that's why I said the recruitment of the individuals in whatever kind of position matters a whole lot. So, for example, after elections, all of those members of the party are supposed to now proceed into ensuring that they talk with the people. After all, a ward is just a town where you could just get the people in a minute to gather together and have conversations and discuss the issues and discuss them as critical as possible. Hey guys, look, you have to get into farming. I think we have to organize ourselves. We have to write to the governor to tell him that we have irrigation advantage in our area, and so we need him to come and put up an irrigation channel where we can be able to. Who does all of these conversations? Nobody talks to nobody. Nigeria Orientation Agency has offices, I guess, in the 36 states of the federation. How much are they doing? Who are they talking to? Nobody's talking to nobody. So at the end of the day, all of these people that you're seeing coming out to, nobody's talking to them. Perhaps maybe a few social media influencers who take it up upon themselves to every day put out some of these things. But then how many people can they be able to reach? But when you do that, cascaded method where you started from the grassroots and everybody is preaching the mantra of what the party stands for, what it wants to do. Because, I mean, when you now progress from election to governance, the ruling party has a responsibility to now take up the responsibility of enlightening people about their policies and what it is that they have to do and get the buy-in of the people. But nobody is talking to nobody. Nobody is even regulating them. Once the elections are over, those guys go to sleep until another election is coming. And so these vacuums are there. Nobody is acting like they recognize that these vacuums exist. Nobody is acting like they want to put up any work to fill up these vacuums. And so the vacuum cannot exist in life, something else will have to come to fill it up. And that's why places like rumors, places like gossips and the rest of them come to fill up people's minds. Look at the issue that happened with the relocation of CBN and FAN, right? At the end of the day, when you hear all of the explanations, they sound objective about why these things are moving. But then because there is a vacuum perhaps in breaking down some of these things about the intent and what have you, a whole large chunk of people from the northern Nigeria had a misconception about it, and they took it home, and a lot of them are still carrying it to today. I'm presuming that no, the president is trying to do a regional agenda of carrying Abuja and taking it back. They're taking it as deep as that. But then, do you really have to blame them? The vacuum is there and nobody else is filling it. So all of those other conspiracy theories that are perhaps sponsored by rival parties who also have a right to do so. I mean, they have a right to latch on those vacuums, and they're ending up succeeding in ensuring that all of those narratives go there. So the fact is, we have to come out, we have to be honest, we have to understand the best ways to manage organizations, be it political parties and what have you, so that at the end of the day, people will be properly engaged, and then they'll probably have a better understanding of the cause.
Well said. I'm going to say in closing, because time is against us, yes. But then what are your final?
I think to add to what Suleiman has said is to say that this vacuum that has been created because of lack of strategic communication, a feedback communication between the people and the government, has created a lot of problems. But we still have the opportunity to repair and remodel and put everything together so that people can understand how governance is all about. As I rightly pointed out, after election, everybody goes to sleep. The only thing you'll be hearing is, when is the appointment coming? When is the appointment for ministers, commissioner coming? And that's what the people will be interested in. And when the appointment comes, the next thing will be hearing that, okay, what is National Assembly bringing in terms of constituency project? Which we know at the end of the day, it becomes something that is also politicized. But from this platform, this night, what we are saying is that government need to sit up, from the federal to the state to the local government need to sit up. And governance is everybody's responsibility. When government is making any announcement, they should break it down to the level that everybody can understand what this policy is all about. What is the goal, what is the target, and what is the aim of ensuring that this policy is for Nigerians and Nigerians benefit from it on the long term.
I think that's basically all about it. I think there has to be increased engagement. I think we have to speak with one another. You know, over time there had been things like confabs that have been created where all Nigerians come together to have a conversation. I think it's right about time that such kind of conversation doesn't have to come in form of a confab, but I think the president, being the president of the Republic, and the GCFR will have to take full charge. We'll have to bring everybody together. He has to engage all of the sectors, all of these cabals who are hoarding the food and everybody. Rather than attempt to come from an antagonistic point of view, you have to engage all of them, engage everybody to see, like, look, hey, my sincerity of purpose is clear, and I need everybody to come on board so we can get to steer this ship all together. I think when that happens, there's going to be a whole lot of shift in some of these things, and then we'll begin to see the succor. There'll be a better understanding, so that we'll do governance during governance and leave politics for when politics comes. And I think with that, really, we'll begin to see some light at the end of the
Thank you very much for joining us, Hashim Suleiman. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Olamilekan. Thank you very much for being in the house, and thank you for joining the conversation. And today's segment, today's episode, with the words of Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. He said, on no account should we allow the selfish ambitions of individuals to jeopardize the peace of the law-abiding people of Nigeria. You can exercise your rights, but I beg you do it within the confines of the law and take responsibility. Hold yourself accountable